After being threatened by my own father, I didn't know what to do. I spent weeks tormented, unable to sleep properly, unable to look at my mother without feeling guilty. The beginning of my story seems ordinary, but the ending is very tragic and irreversible. It all started when my father called asking for a simple favor. His voice was calm, normal as always. He had forgotten an important folder at the office and needed me to pick it up and bring it to his house. My father had always been my hero, my example of honesty and hard work. He built a company alongside my mother, starting from scratch, selling products door to door until he raised a respected business in the city. I grew up watching the two of them work together, trust each other, share every decision. So when he asked me for that favor, I dropped everything and quickly went to the office to help him. I arrived there in the middle of the afternoon. The building was silent, almost empty. I went up to his office and looked for the folder he had described. It was a brown folder, one of those old-fashioned ones with an elastic band. I found it on top of the desk, but when I picked it up, I had a doubt. Was this the right one? I opened it to check if the documents he mentioned were inside. They were contracts, nothing special. But as I was leafing through, something caught my attention. A side drawer of the desk was slightly open. I can't explain what made me look inside. Perhaps the natural curiosity of someone who's alone in a private place. Perhaps a premonition. The fact is, I opened that drawer and saw a manila envelope, one of those used to store important documents. My name wasn't on it. There was nothing written on the outside, but something inside me said I needed to open it, and that's what I did. Inside the envelope were carefully folded papers. I took the first one and started reading. It was a DNA test. I found it strange that this was there and continued reading the document. My father's name was there, in the alleged father field, and next to it, in the tested child field, was the name Natasha Barnes. This name wasn't unfamiliar to me. Natasha was the daughter of Ms. Leah, the housekeeper who worked at my parents' house for over 15 years. I had known that girl since she was born. I remembered her as a small child, playing in the yard while her mother cleaned the house. I remembered seeing her grow up, graduate from high school, get a job. My father was always generous with Ms. Leah, helped with extra money, paid for courses for her daughter. I thought that was beautiful, a gesture of kindness from an attentive employer. But now, holding that paper in my hands, I understood it was never kindness. It was responsibility. It was guilt. I continued reading the other documents. There were receipts for monthly bank transfers to an account in Leah Barnes's name. High amounts, transferred every 10th of the month. There was also a letter, handwritten in Ms. Leah's handwriting. In it, she begged my father to acknowledge paternity, said that Natasha deserved to have his last name, that she couldn't bear lying to her own daughter anymore. The letter ended with a phrase that stayed engraved in my mind. She wrote that if he wouldn't do it out of love, he should at least do it out of empathy. I dropped the papers on the desk and sat in my father's chair. I couldn't think straight. How long had this been going on? Did my mother know? How did my father manage to hide this from all of us for so many years? And Natasha, that young woman I occasionally saw on the street, who always greeted me with a shy smile, did she know we were sisters? The word sister sounded strange, uncomfortable. I had a sister and never knew. I grew up as an only child, with all my parents' attention and love focused on me. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, there was another daughter of his, raised in silence, supported in secret, prevented from having a real father. The injustice of it almost suffocated me. I needed to know the truth. I needed to hear the truth from his own mouth. I took the folder he had asked for and put the other documents back in the drawer, leaving everything exactly as it was. I didn't want him to know I had discovered it. It wasn't the right time yet. I drove to his house with steady hands on the wheel, but my mind completely out of control. When I arrived, my father was in the living room, reading some reports, as if it were just another day. He smiled when he saw me, thanked me for the folder, asked if I wanted to stay for dinner. I said yes. I needed to buy time, to gather courage to face the truth. During dinner, I observed his every move, the way he cut his meat, how he talked with my mother about trivial matters, how he laughed at unfunny jokes. Everything seemed so normal. How could he live like this? How could he sleep every night carrying such a secret? When my mother went to the kitchen to get dessert, I took my chance. I called him over and said we needed to talk in private. He frowned, but agreed. We went to his home office, a small room full of books and photographs of our family. Pictures of me as a child, pictures of their wedding, pictures from trips. I closed the door and asked if he had anything to tell me. He looked at me confused, said he didn't understand the question. So I was direct. I said I had seen the documents in the office drawer. I mentioned Natasha's name. I mentioned the DNA test. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father afraid. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to make excuses or lie. He just lowered his head and admitted everything. He said it was a mistake from years ago, when my mother was sick, hospitalized for months with a serious infection. He was alone, vulnerable, and Leah was there, taking care of the house, providing support. It happened once, he swore. Just once. But it was enough. When Leah discovered she was pregnant, she told him, and he panicked. He thought about everything he could lose. The company he built with my mother, the decades-long marriage, my trust. So he made a deal with Leah. He would support her financially, guarantee a dignified life for the child, but everything had to remain secret. Leah accepted because she had no choice. She needed the money, needed the support. And so the years passed, with him sending money every month, watching Natasha's growth from afar, but never really being a father to her. I didn't know what to feel. I could only think of my mother, how she had been deceived. So I asked if my mother knew. He shook his head. She never knew. And he begged me, with tears in his eyes, not to tell her anything. He said it would destroy my mother, that she didn't deserve to go through that after everything she had already suffered. He said the company was in both their names, that if she found out she could demand a divorce, divide everything, and that would affect my future too, since I was the only heir. He wasn't worried about my mother. He was worried about the assets, about what he could lose. And then came the threat, disguised as a desperate plea. He said that if I told my mother the truth, he would disinherit me, that if I opened my mouth, I would no longer be his daughter. He would remove my name from everything. I would get nothing from the company, nothing from the properties. He said this with great anger. In that moment, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. I left his house that night without giving an answer. I spent weeks tormented, unable to sleep properly, unable to look at my mother without feeling guilty. She asked me if I was okay, if something had happened. I lied, said it was just work fatigue, but inside I was desperate. I started observing Natasha from a distance. I found out where she worked, passed by the place a few times. She was very polite, hard-working. She had gotten a good job at a downtown store. Whenever I saw her, my desire was to cross the street and talk to her, tell her we were sisters, hug her, apologize for all the years she grew up without a father present. But I didn't have the courage. I didn't know how to start that conversation. Until one day, almost 2 months after discovering everything, I received a call. It was my mother, telling me about her day and mentioning that Ms. Leah had suffered a stroke and was hospitalized in critical condition. I decided to visit. When I arrived, Natasha was in the hallway, alone, crying. She recognized me, seemed surprised to see me there. She asked how I knew. I said my mother had told me. We stayed there together, waiting for news from the doctors. And it was in that moment, sitting side by side on an uncomfortable hospital bench, that I realized I could no longer carry that secret alone. I looked at Natasha and saw my own pain reflected in her. She was scared, lost, not knowing if her mother would survive. And I knew she deserved to know the truth, deserved to understand why my father had always been so present in their lives, why he helped so much. I told her we needed to talk. She looked at me with those tired eyes, red from crying so much, and agreed. We went out to the hospital's outdoor area where there were some benches. We sat there and I started talking. I told her everything. About the DNA test, about the deal my father made with her mother. I told her we were sisters. She started crying again. But this time, it wasn't just about her mother. It was about everything. About all the lies, all the times she wondered who her father was and never got an answer. I held her hand and cried with her. In that moment, we were just 2 daughters betrayed by the same man. Ms. Leah didn't make it. She passed away 3 days after that conversation. Natasha was devastated, and I made sure to be by her side every moment. I helped with the funeral, with the costs, with everything she needed. My father showed up at the wake, keeping his distance. He gave me a look that said everything, a look of fear, of threat. But I didn't care. I had made my choice. A few days after the burial, I finally had the conversation I had been postponing. I sat down with my mother in the living room and told her everything, every detail, every lie. I watched my mother collapse in front of me. She cried like I had never seen. She thanked me for telling her, said she deserved to know the truth even if it hurt. And that day, she asked for a divorce. The entire process was painful and lengthy. My father tried everything to prevent it, to negotiate, to convince me to back down. He carried out his threat and actually removed me from the inheritance, altered documents, removed my name from partnerships, but I didn't regret it. Because while he was trying to protect his empire of lies, I was building something much more valuable. I was building a real relationship with my sister. Natasha and I grew closer every day. We discovered we had similar tastes, that we even shared some mannerisms. It was strange and comforting at the same time. She told me about her childhood, about how she always felt something was missing, about how her mother avoided talking about her father. And I shared my memories, my entire life of privileges that I now understood had also been built on her silence and exclusion. My mother, over time, also wanted to meet Natasha. It was a difficult meeting, full of conflicting emotions, but my mother was a wise and generous woman. She understood that Natasha was as much a victim as we were, and gradually, the three of us began to build something I never imagined possible, a family. Today, years after all of this, I no longer have the fortune my father promised me. I don't have the properties, I don't have my name on the company, but I have something money can't buy. I have my dignity. I have the peace of mind of having done the right thing, even when it was difficult. I have a sister who loves me, and whom I love back, and I have the certainty that some inheritances really aren't worth it. My father died 2 years ago. I went to the funeral, not for him, but out of respect for the memory of the man I thought he was when I was a child. Natasha went too, for the same reason. We stood there side by side, watching people offer their condolences, talk about what a wonderful man he was, about his legacy, and we both knew the truth. We knew that legacies aren't measured in companies or properties. They're measured in the lives we touch, the truths we defend, the choices we make when no one is watching. He chose silence and the protection of his image. I chose truth and lost everything he considered important. But I gained myself, and if I could go back, I would do everything exactly the same, because I discovered that the greatest patrimony someone can leave isn't money, it's integrity, and that inheritance no one can take from me.